I'm Eric Barnes of the Daily Memphian, and welcome to the Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're talking with Lauren Reedy of Forever Ready Productions, so stay with us for a conversation with Lauren. Lauren, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I was going to say, first show of 2024.
Yeah.
I was a little disoriented writing that down.
It's going to take months to get used to
Months, because I really barely got used to the whole 2023 thing. So you are listed on Forever Ready Productions. You're listed as storyteller.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It's such a broad term, isn't it? So I like to say that I'm a Jill of lots of trades. I don't like to be put in a box, which is super ironic because I was literally in your box for a decade if you watch the news.
Yeah.
But storytellers in the sense that we're really diving into complex topics and helping put heart into those things, specifically in documentary work, but also in brand stories and helping with fundraising. So making a story that people aren't expecting come to life really on a stage or at an event or things like that. Yeah. But storyteller's super broad. Like I do that beyond my work. Every day I'm telling stories. It's kind of how I see the world.
And primarily through video.
Correct.
Right. I mean, and let's talk a bit about you were on TV, in TV, local news for a decade or more.
Yeah. Local news for 3 years, but on TV for 10.
On TV for 10. But Forever Ready, in full disclosure, you all do work for us when we do our business seminars. You guys film those. You've done some other things for us.
Actually, Scott, my husband, my business partner, does that.
Yes, right. Scott, that's right. But I guess how did you get into this? Let's do that.
Yeah,
let's back up. How did you get into why video,
Yeah, well, I think it all goes back to very early career exposure, which is something I'm a big proponent of. I think everyone should have access to all kinds of careers at a young age. And when I was young, I did a job shadow with a meteorologist at a local TV station, which is actually hilarious. If you know me, math and science are not my strengths, but I loved this idea of this person every day. You tune in and they tell you the weather and they tell you when there's a snow day, which we had a lot of those in the Midwest. And so it started there. I job shadowed at a TV station. And then I got a job when I was 17 as a production assistant. Back then we ran cameras, like actually had to woman a camera. That's what I did there. And now they're all robotic. But I ran cameras and ran scripts and tapes and floor directed for the local newscast, so the ABC affiliate. And on my free time between newscasts, I would hang out with the journalists. So I would hang out with the sports director as he was editing a sports package. And I would go to the news meetings to hear reporters pitch stories. And I started to really see the world through that. The big thing at the first newsroom I was in was it's all about people. People are first. Stories are about people. And that's how we see the world. That's how we explain things, is we find a person. And so because I was in a TV station, that sort of accidentally became my medium. But I think it translates, especially in today's world, across the board.
And this was where?
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Okay.
Sometimes you can hear my accent a little bit.
So the weather, I want to go back to the weatherman thing, because that is, and I think Natalie Van Gundy knows this, the producer of the Behind the Headlines and of Sidebar, that I really want to do like a week as a weatherman. I just want to do a week. I don't want to do it as forever.
Yeah, right.
If anyone's out there listening and they'll invite me on, I would love to do that for
I know
a week.
couple who'd probably invite you.
Oh my God. I just think it would be, I don't know. I just think it'd be so amazing. And I would not want to be like a buffoon about it. Right. I really want to do it and try to do it well. And it's a dream. It's a dream.
There we go. Manifest that. 2024.
It's true. It's true. A friend of mine said, you got to write down a plan. I go, what? He goes, you got to write down a plan. You got to have a plan. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah. It'll change your life. Write it all down, what you want to do with your life. And I was kind of late to do that, but maybe I might do that in 2024.
Never too late. And I would say, let's give a shout out to all the local meteorologists, because they have a lot of pressure these days. Every day having to predict based on science and models what's happening. I mean, that's really what I got to, is I realized that's not the way with which I will need to tell stories. But that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, where it would rain for 3 weeks at a time. And I can't imagine a more boring job as a weatherman back in like the 70s and 80s.
It's going to rain.
It's been raining for 3 weeks and there's no break in sight. So next up.
Yeah.
So you spent, but you weren't drawn. Were you doing like videos at home and did you have a camera? So you were drawn to the camera.
Okay. So the thing is, when I was in middle school, my grandmother, she was gosh, God rest her soul. She's been gone for about more than 20 years. And she had a camera, like a film camera. You know how like all the people these days like want film cameras?
Right.
She gifted me a film camera. It was a Minolta. And I started taking pictures with that. So that's kind of where I started to get my eye for visuals.
Right.
And through that, then got a video camera. Back then, that was like an 8-track and then a Super 8. And I still have all these somewhere. I just need to translate them into digital. But I captured everything we did at home. There's lots of dancing and there's lots of trips that we took. And when I was in high school, I had a little mini DV cam that I would take around and edit. I'm using quotes, documentaries, edit documentaries about our life, which really what they were was like recaps. And so I always had a camera in my hand in some way. And then when we got cell phone cameras, oh boy. I was in love because it was smaller and I didn't have to have all the memory and all that stuff. But I've always had a camera in my hand.
Do you think this is a tangent, but there's almost too many cameras now.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about that.
Because there was a sort of specialness to film that you had a roll of 24 or 36 and you had to kind of think. Mm-hmm. And you also didn't know what they were going to look like. I mean, this is like an old person conversation, but it was really interesting. Like then you'd send them away or you'd drop them off at the Walgreens and you'd get them back. And there was a little bit more purpose to it than just taking so many photos.
Well, and I think that opens a whole can of worms about AI. I mean, when I take a picture, I might edit it a little bit, but I like to see it in its real form because I think we see things that are beautiful and with our own eyes and it's impossible to capture them correctly. But yeah, I've always just cameras. I see the world that way. It's just visuals.
And what's the AI thing though?
So, AI could slowly ruin the genuine and authentic look and feel of things. I mean, let's just take the Northern Lights, for example. Those are beautiful. Had the pleasure of seeing those in 2023. Every camera shot you see of them gives you this giant expectation that they're going to be like lighting the path for you. They're gorgeous, but they don't look like how you see in those photos.
Yeah. We were in Iceland, and so I saw the Northern Lights also
Same.
This last year. And it was a very disorienting thing because I'd seen them before in Alaska a long time ago. But you're kind of like, am I just tired and a little jet lag, or is there a thing going on in the sky?
Is that light pollution? Wait, it's moving.
Yeah, or is that like a cloud going by, and then suddenly,
then
but
they
it's
dance.
not the sort of majestic.
It's not what you see in the photos.
Apple screensaver, or whatever those things are. My family's really into the Apple TV screensavers. Like we talk a lot about the Apple TV screensavers. We text about it a lot.
Wow, it's like a whole thing.
I don't know what we're doing. But we were sick over the holiday, so who knows? So again, I'm here with Lauren Reedy from Forever Ready Productions. Again, you do the range of things from working with businesses, working with nonprofits. You also have done documentaries.
Yes.
You won, what was it, in 2022, the Indie Memphis Hometowner documentary shorts?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Swept that category. What a cool thing. That was a piece about a local teen who falsely confessed to murder. It's called What We'll Never Know, O'Shea Sims. Who tragically died in a car accident, unrelated to the entire case, so wasn't a part of the documentary. That was a piece, people often come to me as a former journalist and say, hey, we have this story, we have no funding, could you help us? And I have to say no, but in this particular case, I was talking with Camila Turner, who's an attorney in town, and she brought me the case files and I read through them and thought, I just can't not tell this story. Like, we need people to know that kids, it's not a requirement to record interrogations of kids. And so that's really what the story became, is how do we let people know that this can happen and it's actually happening perhaps more than we know. And we'll never know because it's not recorded. I know that has since changed a lot in the department with policies around body cams and that kind of stuff. But in this case, it wasn't. And it's still not required by law. So that piece really resonated with people, which is such a contrast between the crime problem we have in the city and the things that we see around youth crime versus this kid who is here and falsely confessed because he didn't have the systems and people and support around him to say, here are your rights, here's what you need to do, that kind of thing. And the officer who took the confession was later left the police force, was fired. So, there's a lot of things in that story, but what I loved most about telling it is that it uncovered a lot in people that they might read headlines every day. They might even read the news that you put out, but they weren't aware of this case because you move on. The case happens, and it was considered closed when he died. So nobody was talking about it.
Did he? So he falsely confessed.
Yes.
Goes to jail.
He goes to jail for, I believe, 11 months. He was released on his own recognizance. And anybody who's listening probably knows what that means because we've had a couple of those happen in the last 12 months. And usually when that happens, it means that the physical evidence does not tie, or there's something there that shows that this person didn't do it, but they confessed. And when you confess, that's it. Like, that's it. You did it until we prove that you didn't. And so in this case, he was released on his own recognizance and he was killed in a car crash unrelated before they could move through to the case and find that, in fact, there was no physical evidence tying him to the scene or to the crime.
Did you ever meet him?
Never met him. Nope. In fact, that's the other piece. So I had an intern who's now a full-time employee at Forever Ready. Shout out to Natalie Linney. She went through the interviews and said, O'Shea is my age.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, I have a person right in front of me who is here who says this could have been me. This could have been any one of my friends. And so it kind of made it a little more personal for us to tell the story. And it resonated.
Yeah.
So, and I've got a thing on our website now that lets you write a letter to lawmakers. I've been talking to our local elected officials and they tell me they're working hard in Nashville to put together a bill that would require that police interrogations of children would be recorded.
Yeah.
For all kinds of reasons. You would think that's a bipartisan thing, but it's a little more tricky than that.
Yeah.
So they've told me.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we're here with Lauren Reedy from Forever Ready Productions. We'll talk about some of the other documentaries you've been involved in, but let me take a minute to do some housekeeping. I'm Eric Barnes. This is the Sidebar, which airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Behind the Headlines podcast, which is really just a show, and then we do take the audio out, and I often like to call it an audio podcast, to the frustration of everyone around me. That we do, again, with the good folks over at WKNO. We also have the Memphis Grizzlies podcast that Drew Hill and Chris Harrington do, the Memphis Tigers podcast that's hosted by Greg Gaston and features a variety of our Tigers writers, football, basketball, whatever's in season. And we also have a food podcast, Soundbites with Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. That also airs here on WYXR every Thursday at 11. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, or your audio podcasts, as I like to call them. It's a new thing for 2024. It's retro. You can also listen to this show and to Soundbites on WYXR at WYXR.org, or download the WYXR app. You can get all the archives of these shows, all the talk shows on WYXR, and all the music shows. Also, you should consider becoming a supporter of WYXR. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can become a member. You can make a donation. All that information is on the WYXR website. Also, if you're not already a subscriber to the Daily Memphian, please to become one. We are also a nonprofit newsroom, locally focused, based here in Memphis. We've got coming up soon Lakeisha Edwards, who is with the Urban Arts Commission. She just took that job in the fall. She's coming up on Sidebar very soon. And I mentioned Behind the Headlines, we've got this week County Mayor Lee Harris. I was going to say Shane Harris, who's a writer for the New York Times. But he's not the mayor. He's not the county mayor, and he's not coming on. So it's really completely irrelevant, except they share a last name. But County Mayor Lee Harris is coming on the show this week. Also, we'll be doing a show on the big North Side High School redevelopment. That's coming up on Behind the Headlines in the coming weeks. We're also trying to get new Mayor Paul Young on. That might even be scheduled. I'm looking at Natalie. We don't know. We're efforting. We are efforting on that. We will get him on soon, as he was just inaugurated. Last thing I mentioned, our business seminars, which Forever Ready helps us out with. If you missed our commercial real estate seminar, which was back in late November, Paul Young, before he was mayor, was there. Ursula Madden, Gwen Fisher from the Chamber, and the three guys whose names I constantly forget, but who were really good. We were all talking about economic development, not just commercial real estate, but all kinds of economic development, the Ford plan, et cetera. That is available if you go to our YouTube page. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Go to YouTube, search for Daily Memphian, and you'll get video of that event. And coming up in 8 weeks, February 28th, Women in Business, our annual seminar, really the best one we do. Chloe Sexton, Carol Coletta, and Pat Mitchell-Worley will be on that panel. That's February 28th. If you go to Eventbrite, search for Daily Memphian, you will be able to get tickets to that. And you did you were on our panel, our Women in Business panel. When, was that pre-COVID?
That was just last year.
That was literally.
I mean, it kind of feels like it was pre-COVID because COVID is just a cloud. But yes.
Yeah. Wait, it was 23 or 22?
It was 23.
It was 23.
Yeah.
Okay. You were great.
Thank you.
I remember the whole thing. No,
I mean, powerhouse of women there that day too.
Who else was on that panel?
It was. Oh, geez. Now you're putting me on the spot, man.
Okay.
Director of the libraries.
Oh, Keenan. Yeah, that's right. Keenan. Yeah, and her daughter introduced her. That was really cool. That's right.
Yeah, it was a great panel.
Yeah. Other documentaries.
I mean,
the documentaries probably are more the passion project side.
They really
of
are.
Life.
They really are. I will say
the pay the bill side.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing.
That's just the reality of this kind of work.
It is. Thank you for acknowledging that. It is. It's harder to get a documentary funded. And I have, from my journalism background, just this desire to do it anyway, and let the other work sort of support that. We did work on something with the De Beaumont Foundation at the end of last year about eviction. And we went to New Orleans. They have a right to counsel policy. If you're curious, look it up. But basically, it's sort of like the equivalent of having a public defender.
Yeah.
You have actual legal representation in the courtroom if you get all the way to court with an eviction notice. And what it's doing is it's preventing homelessness. It's preventing eviction on your record. And overall, helping landlords get the money they need, because landlords need that too. So we went down to New Orleans for 2 days, sort of were embedded in everything that they do, and then turned that very quickly because they wanted to run it at a national conference. And so that I love. It's a very complex issue. You have to find a way to make it connect with audiences outside of New Orleans. And so that's a really fun one. Our team loves doing that. I got a lot of former TV journalists that now work at Forever Ready. And so we love to take that complex topic and make it something that people can grasp in 8 minutes. And then the one we did most recently locally was called Empty to Enough. It was with Room in the Inn, if you're familiar with their work.
We had them on
Lisa Anderson and Whitney.
Right? We had her on, on
so
Sidebar.
I've been following Room in the Inn since I was a journalist at Channel 5. I did a story actually about a neighborhood that was unhappy that they were going to host homeless friends overnight. They were unsure about how the safety of that, impacted the neighborhood. And that's how I met Lisa Anderson in a moment where I had to report something that I, was like, oh gosh, neighbors are complaining. Tell us more. And sort of followed the story ever since. Been documenting pieces of their story along the way. In 2020, they had a big expansion. In 2021, they moved into a new building and now have a family inn. And so we wanted to show people what it's like to turn people away on a cold night like we have right now. Yeah. And basically after 2020, less than half of congregations returned to hosting. And so every single night they are turning dozens of people away, mostly men because they prioritize women and children and families. And so capturing that, showing what that was like, kind of a little bit of guilt in your heart, feeling like, wow, how can I be a part of this change? And then showing what happens when they find a place to stay and now have a steady housing and support services. Right. And so that whole concept was really rooted in empty churches most of the week. And how do we fill them with hospitality and providing people a warm place to sleep? So it really moved people. And I checked with them in the new year, and they've already got new congregations signed up, and they have gotten tons of volunteers just from telling that story. Yeah. So that, to me, that's what it's about, is calling people to action. So whether it's contacting your legislature and saying, representative saying, hey, can you help change this law? This is important. Or it's volunteering or signing up or donating, or simply having a conversation over drinks with friends about eviction, right? Like, these are heavy topics, but the goal behind these documentaries is to drive change. And whether that's personally or in policy and legislation or simply in your own heart, I think those documentaries have done that for me as well.
Again, how long were you in local TV news?
3 years, 2011 to 13. Is that 3 years?
Yeah.
It was 3 years, whatever the math is on that. Again,
I picture that being an incredible grind.
Yes. And
it's amazing some of the people who've done it. We had Kanji Anthony on who took a break and is back doing a daytime show. And I was at a thing with Joe Birch recently, and he's done it for decades. And I don't know we did a piece on Joyce Peterson.
Yes,
recently,
wonderful journalist.
Last week, I think.
A gem.
It is I just can't picture the grind.
Yeah,
and because you're doing so many stories.
Yep.
And you're just moving so fast, and there's immense pressure to do things that are impactful, but also in many TV stations, there's a formula. It's a business. You've got to kind of hit certain marks.
Yep.
So was that why you left? Was it just the grind, or was it a desire to do other things? Or I'm fascinated by
it. It was a lot of things, and I'm now coming up on 7 years removed, which has also involved a lot of introspection and, quite honestly, a lot of healing around deciding to leave. It was my dream to go on to be on the Today Show.
Yeah.
And, I had a couple of people tell me I had the capacity and skill to do so. But what started to happen when I first started in the business, I said to myself, I can report on things that I disagree with, right? Journalism, you have this objective. You want to report on all the sides and not bring your personal opinion. I can do that. But the one thing I won't do is jeopardize who I am at the core. And what was happening to me in that grind was I was getting cynical. And I was saying things inside and externally that weren't me.
Yeah.
Like coming in going, I really don't want to work on pitching a story today. I hope there's breaking news. You know what that means is that somebody's having a really awful day. And I'm sitting over here hoping that happens so that I don't have to, come up with the story. And that's not who I am. And so when I started doing some digging, I realized I'd still want to tell stories. I still want them to make impact. That's why I got into the business. And there's still people doing that. You just named a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But I needed to get out on my own terms, because if I stayed in too long, I'm not sure that I would have been asked to leave, because I was becoming so cynical. And so it was a big journey for me. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was going to walk away from this dream. I'm using quotes. Yeah. And then also find a way to continue using the gifts and the skills that I had, because I loved being a journalist.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, meeting the people on the streets of Memphis, that grind that you talk about, it shaped me. It's now deeply rooted in who I am. And so I don't look back on any of those times with bad, ill, memories now. I now look back and think what a gift that was. Every day to have something new, every day to interact with somebody, and find good in the little things. And so here I am 7 years later, still doing that, just not doing it in the daily grind, not doing it in the way that when I was in it started to get really sensational. And that was hard. You can't just show up to a shooting and report live at 5 and then never talk about it again. What good does that do in a city like Memphis that has a lot of things we want to work on and improve? Sure. It's so that's what I also got to is, how can I best use my gifts in a way that actually inspires change instead of just makes people afraid at home while they're watching, And it's changed a lot. So I always am careful to emphasize that there are still great people working in news, TV news specifically, really doing the work, and they care deeply. Joyce Peterson is one of those folks that when I watch her, I just feel like I learned something, I know more. And she cares deeply. And so there's a lot of folks that are still doing that. I just needed to step away in order to keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would do our little show over on WKNO every week, and it's just a news roundtable, and, or it's, these great interviews, not for anything I do, but the great guests that Natalie lines up. But it's so different.
So different.
So different.
Yeah.
And that pressure on the TV pressure is one that I'm fascinated by.
And every once in a while I edit something in a day and I'm like, I still got it.
You still got it.
Or when the Grizzlies or the Tigers go to the playoffs, or the Liberty Bowl this year I went. And I was like, oh, this is when I miss it. Because I love being on the sidelines. I love having to turn highlights by 5 p.m. That stuff I still love. And I miss that part of it.
Yeah. What else? What other projects have you guys got going?
Well, here's the thing. Last year ended incredible with something that I can't even really explain how much it means to me. One of the first documentaries we did when I went solo was about Lifeline to Success and DeAndre Brown. Are you familiar with DeAndre?
I think I am, but tell the story.
So DeAndre founded Lifeline to Success after writing a creed from his jail cell. He served time. I think it was 2 or 3 years. And when he came out of jail, he started Lifeline to Success. And it was a nonprofit that was designed to help people re-enter society. Because so many folks that end up in the justice system are broken in ways they don't even know. You know, that there's things that have never been addressed, never talked about family issues, never talked about how to make a living beyond the life they knew. And so he started this. He hired us because he wanted to go speak around the country and tell people about what he was doing in Memphis and how it's working and what's different. So fast forward, that piece, it was called You Must Believe. That piece won an Emmy. And if you know DeAndre, you know it won an Emmy because like he tells everybody it's in his profile picture, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So fast forward years. So that was, 2018, 2019. In 2023, July of 2023, he sat before the parole board in Nashville. And we went. And they asked him about his whole life. He was asking for a pardon from the governor. They asked him about everything that he did. They asked him about the crimes. And then they asked him about the documentary. And they said, in your career, it says that you have a documentary that won an Emmy. And he's answering and he says, yeah, I wanted to tell people about my story. And, somebody somewhere said it was worth an award. And he's talking all about it, getting emotional. What I loved about that piece is that it moved him deeply. Not only did it move audiences and myself included, have a whole different perspective of folks who've been incarcerated following that piece, but it moved him and it became a piece of his story. And in December, he was pardoned.
Oh, wow.
By the governor.
That's amazing.
And one of the first calls that was made after, of course, his wife and the people that he loves dearly was to me. And I ran over he now serves as director of the Office of Reentry. So I ran over there with cameras, of course.
Yeah.
And just had a moment and was able to capture him telling his family he'd been pardoned. And obviously he's doing the work. So I'm just pressing record and capturing it. But to use his story in that way to move him all the way up to that point, I'm certain that the folks on the Board of Parole watched it. Yeah. I'm certain that probably the governor watched it.
Sure.
And it's old now, but it's not old. Every time I watch it, I still cry because I see the movement in him and I see how it's impacting others. And so that honestly, career highlight to have a documentary go that far in the line and know that it resulted in helping him get a pardon from the governor. And so what we're working on in 2024 is telling his whole story and then trying to send that to the president's office, because that's the next step, is that he also has federal charges and he needs that. And when he was asked before the parole board, why do you want this? Most people want this so they can get a job, or so they can vote. You already have a job. And he said, I want to show people that they might not be able to get pardoned, but they can turn their lives around and they can become responsible contributors to their communities and making a difference. And that to me is just so much bigger than, I have this joke, I say bigger than an Emmy. It's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than the accolades. And it moves people, including him. So that was a highlight last year. I didn't even get time to process it because it came and then Christmas came and here we are.
That's amazing.
But that just tells you what the impact of a story can do.
Right. We're almost out of time. I always try to ask to try to remember to ask. I really am rusty because I got so sick. We were talking about this before. I was so sick over the holidays and I'm super rusty. This is going to be crazy. I'm with Shane Harris, mayor of Shelby County this week, really botching it. And actually, Lee Harris listens to Sidebar. He actually, so sorry.
Sorry, right?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. What was your first concert?
My first concert? Oh gosh, you're going to be a little bit judgmental, but it was NSYNC.
No, that's a good one. I don't know that we've had that before.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know. There's no judgment. It's a judgment-free zone.
Well, I had butterfly clips and I was wearing Doc Martens and the whole thing. It was pretty awesome. And I told everybody that Justin Timberlake winked at me when he was flying. He did. He totally winked at me.
You would know.
And little did I know that one day I would live in his hometown.
There you go. And where was it? Where did you
Omaha, Nebraska.
In Omaha, Nebraska? At the civic auditorium kind of thing or something
and
like that?
It was a birthday thing. So we rode in a limo.
Yeah.
So
nice.
And we were everyone thinks we're NSYNC. I don't know. I was 9.
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
That's a good one.
I hope Justin listens to this.
I hope he does too. But that is all the time. Lauren Reedy from Forever Ready Productions. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the show, you can get it at WYXR, the Daily Memphian, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.